Okay, good morning, everybody. I can now confirm that the meeting is being recorded and is live to the public. Thank you very much. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Sue. Good morning and welcome to East Devon District Council's virtual joint overview and scrutiny committee meeting on Wednesday, the 13th of January, 2021. This is the first of two sessions, with the second tomorrow, the 14th of January, also at 10 a.m. I am your chair, Councillor Nick Hookway. I would also like to welcome anybody watching the meeting via the live streaming. All participants here today are taking part remotely, and as well as being live streamed, the meeting is being recorded. So please bear this in mind throughout, and may I remind you to be careful with your language. May I also remind members that the Code of Conduct applies throughout this meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. Please turn any telephone devices off or to silent. As this overview and scrutiny committee meeting is dependent upon an internet connection and a power supply, in the event of a break in the internet connection or power supply, please bear with us as we try to reconnect. After 15 minutes, if we are not able to reconnect, we will consider the meeting adjourned and reconvene at a later date. Please check the committee page on our website for details. Please make sure all microphones are muted when you are not speaking to avoid any background noise levels. Keep points short, and in order for the meeting to run smoothly, if the point you wish to make has already been made, please do not speak, only to agree or to agree with or repeat that point, and do not interrupt. May I also remind members of the meeting's protocol and ask that members do not use the chat function except for alerting us to technical issues. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand and wait to be called. All councillors have been set the agenda for today's meeting. Any members of the public who want to view the agenda can do so by visiting our website at www.eastdevon.gov.uk. Would councillors please note that as this is a joint committee meeting over 2 days, some of the procedures we have become used to for virtual meetings will be different. We will now start the meeting by doing a roll call of committee members here present. Can you please now unmute your microphones, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. When you have confirmed you are present, please mute your microphone again. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Overview committee members, Councillor Allen.
Yes, I'm present, Sarah.
Thank you, Councillor Blakey.
Present. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, Councillor Bond.
Apologies, Sarah, present.
Thank you. Councillor De Sarum.
Present, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Councillor Gazzard.
Present.
Thank you, Councillor Hall.
Good morning, present.
Thank you, Councillor Hartnell.
Present, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hookway.
Present.
Councillor Johns.
Present, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Councillor King.
Present, thank you.
Councillor Ranger. Chair, I think Councillor Ranger will be joining us shortly.
Yes.
Councillor Woodward. Thank you. Scrutiny committee members, Councillor Brown.
Present.
Councillor Chapman.
Present, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chubb. Is Councillor Chubb here? No. Councillor Coleman.
He's having problems getting in through Zoom and will give his apologies if he can't get in.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Davey.
Present.
Councillor Hawkins.
Present.
Councillor McCollum.
Present.
Councillor Parr.
Present.
Councillor Pepper. No. Councillor Pepper. No. Councillor Rylance.
Present.
Councillor Taylor.
Present.
Thank you, Chair. The meeting is quorate.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Okay, agenda item 1, public speaking. Do we have anybody registered to speak? No? Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting on pages 3 to 11. If anyone has a comment on the set of minutes on the 15th of January 2020, please do this by raising your electronic hand. If I have no electronic hands raised, I will take this as an indication that you all agree with the minutes of the previous meeting. Do we have any hands raised?
No hands raised, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. The minutes of the previous meeting are agreed. Agenda item 3, apologies. I have one apology on my list, which is Councillor Chris Wright. Do we have any others, Sarah?
No, no more apologies, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Overview committee members. Councillor Allen.
None.
Councillor Blakey.
None.
Councillor Bond.
None.
Thank you. Councillor Desarum.
None other than to say I am an Exmouth Town Councillor in regard to some of the items just briefly touched on for Queen's Drive, but other than that, none. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gazzard.
None, Sarah, but just reiterate what Councillor Desarum has said.
Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Only that I'm a Devon County councillor, if that comes at any point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hartnell.
None.
Thank you. Councillor Hookway.
Yes, I'm on the Queen's Drive delivery group. That may be relevant.
Thank you. Councillor Johns.
The only thing that I can see is that we've car parkings coming up, and obviously Otley Town Council, which I'm also a member of, has 2 East Devon District Council car parks in it. But apart from that, nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor King.
No interest, thank you.
Thank you. Has Councillor Ranger joined us yet? No, I don't think so. Councillor Woodward.
No, I don't think he's joined yet, Sarah.
No, thank you. Scrutiny committee. Councillor Brown.
None.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman.
None, but I am a town councillor for Exmouth.
Thank you. Councillor Chubb. No. Councillor Coleman. Councillor Coleman, I think you may have just joined us and you're on mute. We're doing declarations of interest, if you have any. We'll come back to Councillor Coleman. Councillor Davey.
Just that I'm an Exmouth Town Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins.
None, thank you.
Councillor McCollum.
Possible 2. One is car parks, as I'm still employed by Hull Town Council, and I'm chairman of the HRB.
Sorry, I didn't catch the second one. Can you speak up, Councillor?
Sorry, chairman of the HRB.
Ah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parr.
None.
Councillor Pepper, I think, is still not here. Councillor Ranger not here. Councillor Rylance.
Yeah, so the usual, I'm a Broadclyst parish councillor and resident of Broadclyst, so anything to do, well, there's quite a lot about Broadclyst in these service plans, so, which to do with the regional park and car parks, etc., etc. So a number of items involved in the location and geography of Broadclyst.
Thank you very much. Councillor Taylor.
None.
Thank you. And can I just go back to Councillor Coleman? Do you have any declarations, please?
Yeah, I'm an Exeter Town Councillor. Sorry, I had my iPad doesn't seem to work this morning, so I come on Zoom another route.
Thank you very much. Chair, back to you now.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Right, agenda item 5, matters of urgency. There are no matters of urgency. Agenda item 6, confidential or exempt items. There are no confidential or exempt items which officers recommend should be dealt with in this way. Agenda item 7, the draft revenue and capital budgets for 2021-2022, pages 12 to 29. The purpose of this item is to understand the draft revenue and capital budgets as presented to and agreed by Cabinet on the 6th of January 2021. Any recommendations from this meeting will be presented back to Cabinet on the 3rd of February 2021, when members finalise budget proposals to be recommended to Council. In order to assist with the running of this meeting, may I suggest that at the end of this item, we agree a provisional recommendation following the discussion of all service plans, which will conclude tomorrow and may further inform the draft budgets. The provisional recommendation can then be agreed in its final form. Can I ask Simon Davey to present his report, please?
Thank you, Chair. That was very helpfully set out. In terms of the reports, I apologise for those that were attending Cabinet, because I will just repeat some of the key items within the draft budget, just to highlight some of the main points and some of the risks for members to understand. If I first go through the general fund budget, so that's where the majority of our services are paid for, our day-to-day costs. That starts on page 14 of your agenda. There's some background information which I won't cover off, but it talks about sort of government funding generally and the spending review. But if we turn to next year's draft budget 21-22, members will be aware from our financial plan, our medium-term financial plan and medium-term financial modelling that we've done, that before we started the 21-22 budget process, we were projecting that we'd have a deficit of £700,000 to find in working through the details of the budget. I'm pleased to say in presenting the draft budget that it is a balanced budget whereby income, the expenditure is met by income. So the budget in front of you at this stage is balanced. Just to run through in a bit of detail, on page 16, you have a summary of the portfolio budgets comparing next year's proposed budget with the current year. And then if you look through all those totals, they'll come back to a balanced budget in terms of the bottom figure is a council tax requirement of 9.119 million, which then balances off the various expenditure and income within that draft budget. The budget book that's linked to this report then goes through in significant detail, portfolio by portfolio, if members wish to look at that sort of granulation of budgets. I've highlighted below that table some of the main variations between years, just for members' consideration. But returning to the medium-term financial plan, where we had a £700,000 deficit, the main areas whereby we've balanced that budget I've highlighted in the table in 2.1. Having said that, what I should have said is in terms of the draft budget being balanced, and these items are highlight in terms of how that's helped us, that all services have had to do a significant amount of work in order to produce balanced budgets and continue to create efficiencies in order to allow for additional items and costs within the budget, but also allowing us to continue to provide existing services, which I think is good testament in terms of East Devon District Council. So there are no service reductions within the budget, and we've managed to balance the budget for 21-22. But if I just highlight some of the items that have helped us do that, and these shouldn't come as a surprise in that they have been discussed in prior meetings through the budget strategy and capital allocation group panel. And also the financial plan was brought to both scrutiny and overview committees. So the preparation of this budget, hopefully members will be aware of. So one of the key items that's helped us balance next year's budget in terms of staffing costs is in our medium-term financial plan, we assumed a 2% pay rise across the board. It's in terms of what the government has issued, that's now, they're freezing pay apart from those on 24,000 or below. And we assume that policy will flow through into local government settlement in terms of salaries. So we've been able to reduce our costs there by the 218,000. The next item I want to highlight to you, and I will highlight further in this report, is at this stage, the draft budget includes 300,000 additional income for some proposals regarding car park charges in terms of increases for category 1 car parks. So that should be noted by members, that 300,000 of additional income is included in our budget. The final thing just to highlight in that table in 2.10 is savings made in grounds maintenance of 70,000. So those proposals have been discussed and they're now coming through in the draft budget. 2.11 of the report on page 18, I've just highlighted some key areas of the budget that we're spending in terms of aligning to the new council's statement of intent. Budget, nearly another £1 million being set aside for the carbon reduction measures. There's significant budget allocation regarding addressing poverty. And then I've highlighted some other areas within the budget to align with that new statement of intent. Also, the final bullet point in terms of sort of an arrow and then further bullet points below on page 19, I've pulled out numbers whereby specific additional resources, mainly around staff, have been included in next year's budget. The majority of those have been already brought to members through various committee reports and been through council for approval. And the others that are being proposed are funded. Ones that are new and unfunded, I'll just highlight to you, just so you're aware that they are new items and there are links in the draft report so you can go and look at more details behind those. So a new item that's coming in is a request for a dedicated Seaton Wetlands Ranger. That's at a cost of 28,000. The next new item coming in there is a recycling and waste team leader post at a cost of 41,000. Additional support in street scene in terms of their business support team and administration, 13,000. And then an additional 5,000 to extend the period for RNLI cover in terms of Exmouth, to extend the period of cover on the beach. So those 4 items are new to members. So that's why they are additional information that's been attached to the report. Just to remind you that at the moment, all those items are within your draft budget. If I continue down the report, 2.14, just to highlight to you council tax. So the draft budget does propose an increase in council tax of £5 a year for East Devon District Council. That raises the charge from £146.78 to £151.78 for a Band D property for the year. That's a 3.4% increase. Just to say that that's in line with the government's referendum details, if you like. So, and also in line with what the government assumes that East Devon District Council will set its council tax at and the income that we will get in for council tax. So when it does its spending review for all authorities, it assumes that each council will go up to the referendum level in terms of the income that's available to it, and then it will take that income into consideration when it announces the settlement calculations. A significant area that I do wish to highlight to members is in 2.15 of the report. So I'll take a little bit of time going through that. Under general fund balance, so the council holds a general fund balance for emergencies, and we've adopted a range that the general fund balance should be held between 3 million and 3.8 million. That balance at the moment, we're predicting by year end, the current year, will be at the bottom end of that adopted level. So it'll be nearer the 3 million. The reason for that is a significant element is being taken from reserves from the general fund in the current year to deal with COVID expenditure. So bearing that in mind, your general fund balance when we start next year's budget will be at the bottom end, if our predictions are right, of the 3 million level. But there are a number of risks in next year's budget that's being proposed that would normally fall, if those risks come out in terms of costs, would normally fall to the general fund. So I need to just highlight to you what those risks are, but also hopefully give you reassurance that we've mitigated those risks within the budget, but that would be for your consideration. So the first one is in connection with implications of COVID-19 for 21-22 budget. So within the budget, we've assumed that our income levels return to pre-COVID levels, and also our expenditure does as well. There's obviously risks around that, but these I believe are mitigated in that the government has stated that the income guarantee scheme will be in place for the first quarter of next year. So if our income drops below the budget that we've allowed, 75% of that income will be guaranteed by government and paid to us in grant. And also the government in the settlement has announced additional COVID grant for us of 616,000 for next year. So that will cover any unknown additional expenditure that may occur. So that 616 hasn't been allocated in the budget as yet. So what I'm suggesting to members is you hold that sum, you know that grant is coming, and it mitigates any additional costs that may come during the year that we've unbudgeted. And also the loss guarantee scheme should deal with any income reductions that we may see. So hopefully that reassures members in terms of the implications of COVID for next year. In terms of car parks, which I said I'd return to, our budget does include additional income of 300,000, which was debated through the car park TAF and also through Scrutiny. That decision, Scrutiny have asked Council to consider in terms of those proposals. That decision will be made at the same time Council have to consider approving next year's budget. So the timing isn't ideal in that you'll be approving the budget at the same time as that proposal comes through. If members agree to an increase, but there was consideration at Scrutiny whether the implementation should be delayed in terms of the impact of COVID in our high streets or on our high streets, I believe that it's still prudent to, if council have agreed it, that income will come in our base budget in future years or a point in 21-22, depending when members agree for its implementation. So I consider that members could take the loss of income in the first few months or the first year out of reserves if that's the case. However, if council decide that no, it doesn't wish to increase those charges, I believe I would need to bring back to you another report straight after the February council on how we will save that 300,000 across our services, because your base budget will be artificially set unbalanced by that 300,000. If it's just a timing issue, I think the general fund can pick that up, or other funds available, which I'll come on to. But if it's a decision that the council decide that no, that income won't be coming, then I need to come back to members with an alternative plan about how we save that 300,000. LED, members will be aware of the risks around LED in terms of our leisure provision. You've agreed additional subsidy for the current year of 1.3 million to help deal with COVID. And basically that's in connection with a reduction in their income. So we're funding that in the current year to allow them to continue trading and to continue services, leisure services for East Devon. The issue for 21-22 is how the effect of COVID will continue to affect their income levels. There has been an initial meeting of the new LED forum where LED have indicated they will need additional increase in the current subsidy level, which is 898,000. They're looking at a significant increase for further years, particularly next year, in terms of East Devon District Council, for them to be able to continue running the services that they continue to operate. That needs to be debated by the forum. and options consideration given to those requests, and then recommendations back to Cabinet and Council. The request, just to give you sort of the magnitude of what's being initially requested, although as I say, further work needs to be done, options considered, but they were looking in the order of between 296,000 and 673,000, depending on how that increase is phased. So it could be that they're looking at a 673 increase for next year, similar level the following year, but then a reduced level, or 296,000 over a 5-year period. That's still to be debated, still to be considered, but is a key risk in that our budget for next year just allows for the 898,000, the level of subsidy we're paying at the moment. There's also some other risks in the budget, in that there's ongoing work in terms of Queen's Drive open space. The base budget allows for the continuation of 50,000, which has been the level that we've allowed for a few years to run Queen's Drive open space. But there are considerations coming through from the working group in terms of recommendations that could lead to additional costs. So members will have to consider those. And a similar situation with the poverty panel. Although the budget does contain a number of actions, and there will be further work in terms of how East Devon's economy can recover from COVID, I'm sure the panel will come up with additional requests in terms of revenue funding that may come to Cabinet and Council. Brexit's still there in terms of possible risks. So I suppose unusually for a budget that I'm presenting, I'm highlighting to you that although you're setting a balanced budget, there are a number of things in there that are in the budget that could come in year, or even come at the same time you're setting the budget, that could ask for additional costs for you to consider. Normally those additional costs would fall upon the general fund balance, but I've already highlighted to you that the general fund balance is at the lower end. So what the strategy is that I'm proposing for you is the government has announced as part of the settlement, and it was a surprise, because of all the key pressures at district council level, they have announced a one-off grants for district councils for 21-22 called lower tier service grant allocations. That I've discussed at the bottom of 2.15. Our allocation for the year is 700,000. So what I propose, with members' consent, at the moment that 700,000 again isn't in our draft budget. It's a new item that's been announced. So what I suggest is members hold that sum to mitigate those elements that I've discussed. So as they come through, members can consider we've got that 700,000 sat there for these types of pressures, and these are the pressures now coming through, and allocate that 700,000 as we go. So I hope that makes sense, but that's the strategy I'm proposing in the draft budget. The other elements within the report talk about future budget strategy, but I've been into that previously with members in quite a bit of detail, but I think it's right just to highlight in the report and remind members. So that's the general fund budget. Hopefully that's understandable. I've highlighted the key issues. The report also covers the housing revenue account, but obviously that will be debated by the Housing Review Board in detail. But just to sort of give you an overview, the housing revenue account budget, that's the draft budget, does give a surplus in the order of 984,000. That will then be debated in year through the Housing Review Board in terms of priorities of that spend, whether it's around replacing right to buy properties in terms of those lost through right to buy, whether it's the carbon reduction programme and work within the housing revenue account, or whether it's additional monies for key maintenance works. That's not unusual for us to set a surplus in the order of just under £1 million, and then the priority of spend will be debated by the Housing Review Board as they go through the year. The housing revenue account also, to reassure member, keeps that proposed budget keeps the HRA balance within its adopted range, and it's actually at the top end of that adopted range. I do highlight with the housing revenue account, there is significant work to do this year in refreshing a business plan, and that work has been started. So you'll see for next year's budget, 22-23, a revised business plan presented to you. But most of that work will be taken through the Housing Review Board. And then finally, capital. All the work of the budget setting and allocation panel in their recommendations of each project to go forward into next year's budget has been adopted and is now reflected in the draft budget. Those individual schemes were brought forward in the minutes of Cabinet for their approval, which they were approved, and have now been reflected in the draft budget presented to you. To go through in detail of what those projects are, you will need to look at the budget book. The end pages of the budget book contain the capital programme and all the schemes that were already approved, but also new schemes to be approved and now reflected. The 3.6 of the report just gives you an overview of the capital programme, how it's being funded, and just to assure you that the deficit of in 21-22 of nearly 8 million has been factored into in terms of our affordability and factored into revenue in terms of how we fund that. Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry that was quite a quick rattle through, but happy to take any questions, and I'm sure they will lead on to the service plans then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Simon. Okay, I will now invite non-members to speak on this item by raising their electronic hands. Hold on. Right, okay. I'll start with Councillor Jack Rowland, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say a few words as I am the finance portfolio holder. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank Simon and his team, because without using that well-worn phrase about unprecedented times, the challenges that have faced the finance side over this financial year to date and into next year have been considerable, and every challenge has been met. And I think to produce a balanced budget in terms of the smaller amount of deficit that is being forecasted, which is actually lower than what it was being forecasted earlier this year, is quite a magnificent achievement in my opinion. And I think it shows the, I'm going to use another well-worn phrase to bring prudence into the equation as well. And considering as well that what is in front of members today is actually a balanced budget, but is not affecting any of the current services, and is actually going to be making progress on some of the ambitions of the administrations to be applauded. So it wasn't so much a question, it was just a statement from me as a portfolio holder, and thank you for your time.
Right, thank you, Councillor Rowland. Councillor Eleanor Rylance, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to echo what Jack had just said. Actually, I kind of always imagine Simon scrabbling down the back of virtual sofas to balance these books, and I just think it's absolutely astonishing what you managed to do this year, you know, given everything we've been through. I do have a question. It's probably a really dim question, but, you know, after a while, reading all these figures makes my head spin. But how have we managed to cut £250,000 from the environment portfolio? So that's my question. And I probably should know the answer to this, so apologies, I probably do.
Simon, can you give a guidance on that one, please?
Yeah, the environment portfolio, and I'm just checking I'm right, it includes the car park income of 300,000 additional income. So you're presenting with net figures, which includes expenditure and any income.
Okay, right, thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Paul Miller, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I just want to highlight 3 issues in Simon's brilliant report. So we've got the car parking issue, of course. I think the appropriate thing would be to delay for a year. I do think coming out of a pandemic, I think it's important that independent businesses are supported So where we have car parks near high streets, I think it would go down really badly if we were to increase those. When it comes to LED, that's the part of the budget I'm most worried about. There's this fundamental unfairness when it comes to the funding of statutory leisure providers across the country. We've seen a huge amount of support for in-house leisure providers, but outsourced providers, including charitable ones like ours, have been really left behind, despite the fact that successive governments, Labour and Conservative, have actually encouraged councils to go that way in terms of outsourcing. So I'm baffled by that, and I really hope that as a council we keep the pressure up on government to support our leisure service, because that's an astronomical amount of money that LED needs to survive. And I also wanted to highlight the fact, I was speaking with Peter Gilpin recently, the CEO of LED, to highlight the importance of us getting a leisure strategy in place really quickly. He was explaining to me that this will, if we could get a new leisure strategy in place this year, as ours is hopelessly out of date, it does give us a greater chance of actually accessing funding from the National Lottery and other grant providers. So I just wanted to put that on the agenda. And finally, we've obviously had we had the results today of the yesterday, sorry, of the Section 106 votes in Exmouth. Now, one of those projects that was successful, the money had already been earmarked through the capital allocations projects fund for the coming year. Now that money is being funded through the Section 106, and I'm referring to Brixton Park, which is £150,000. Now that, just the question for Simon, does that £150,000 come back into our budget for us to use for other things, Simon, or is this, or am I mistaken there?
I suppose just to put it into context, in that you're right, the proposals assumes that 150 at this stage would have been taken from our own capital resources. The bid that was considered by the panel were fully aware of that, in terms of a few bids that came forward, that they were subject to that 106 consultation, and members were fully aware that hopefully they would be funded by 106, but if not, because of the priority seen in those schemes, then East Devon would fund them. So with that being funded, the capital programme will come down by 150,000. I suppose it's just saying, out of the capital programme of nearly 8 million, the effect is quite minimal in terms of, it's the impact on revenue is the thing I'm always looking at. So with the 150,000 capital, the effect on revenue is about 6-7k per annum that I need to take into account. So it coming out of the programme won't significantly affect the revenue side. Because you're dealing with quite large amounts in our capital programme, that won't have a significant implication in terms of our overall funding, whether we can afford it or not. I hope that makes sense, Councillor.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I'll just come back extremely quickly, if that's okay, Chair. There were other projects in that Section 106 vote, a couple of others which were of small cost. I mean, is there any chance that the 150,000 can come back? I know it's a relatively small amount of money when it comes to the budget. Will that come back to be used, or where is that money going? Is my question. I know it's relatively small, but if I can through
the chair. So the capital programme moves consistently through the year, so we'll just reflect, because you can imagine, capital projects do vary, and we bring back monitoring reports on a regular basis to Cabinet in terms of the position of the capital programme. So the capital programme will be adjusted by that amount. The point for members to consider, if there are other schemes it wants to replace that expenditure with, I suppose from my point of view, is just bearing in mind that all the items that are on the capital programme have been through quite an intense evaluation process. So they've all had to complete PIDs. They've all been debated in detail, scheme by scheme, and compared. Each project has been compared against each other in terms of priorities. So if there are additional schemes, I would suggest that the members would need to get officers to complete business cases. They go back through the budget strategy capital allocation panel for consideration, and then come through Cabinet Council would be my suggestion, rather than just schemes mentioned and then included in the capital programme. The proper process would be a proper consideration of those schemes and priority of those schemes. The good thing about capital and the budget is, if necessary, the programme can be amended in year. So if there seem to be priority schemes that we've excluded from the programme at the moment, if they do come forward in year, they can be added to the capital programme. Whereas revenue, it's a lot more difficult because you set the budget for the year.
Oh, many thanks, Simon. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Andrew Moulding, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thanks, Simon, very much for the very understandable report. And I would like to take members to item 215 and the lower tier service grant allocation of £700,000 for 21-22, which I think is something that we weren't necessarily anticipating. And although I am aware that this council recently has criticised government for its lack of support for district councils, and in this case, obviously that 700,000 is very welcome for next year. And I see that its uses are for homelessness planning, recycling, refuse collection, and leisure services. So am I right in assuming that some of that fund could be used for additional support for LED leisure? And following on from Councillor Paul Miller, and indeed declaring my interest as president of a sports centre in Axminster, Cloakham Lawns, and these places like Cloakham Lawns, like the Cranford Sports Club in Exmouth, they are not directly funded by local authorities, but presumably if this money can be used for leisure services, could this money be used to support those sports clubs who, again, are not receiving direct funding from government? And that's my question.
Thank you. Simon?
Thank you, Chair. The money, the cost pressures that were highlighted for district councils, I've copied in the report in terms of how this grant was given, and we have seen those. So there are those cost pressures included in the current budget: homelessness, recycling, refuse. And you're right, Councillor Moulding, in terms of leisure as well. So this grant money could be offset against some of the increase for LED. And that is for members' consideration and debate as those costs come forward. What I would say in terms of other sports organisations in the district, I wouldn't see this as part of this money, which is around supporting direct services and pressures of East Devon District Council in its services. Probably the more appropriate funding mechanism would be the discretionary grants that are being rolled out at the moment, and the government have allocated additional sums to the discretionary element that members will be considering over the course of later on this month. And I understand that there is a request there, for example, from Cranbrook within those considerations for that panel to consider. So I would, for those fundings, I would link that grant money is associated more than this 700,000.
Right, okay, thank you very much. Now, before I ask members of the committees to speak, there's just one small point of declarations of interest that Sarah needs to just finalise. So Sarah, over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We had two councillors who weren't present during the first declarations of interest, which were Councillor Woodward.
Yep.
Do you have any declarations, please?
No, none.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Ranger.
No declarations, thank you.
Thank you very much. Back to you, Chair.
Right, thank you very much indeed. Okay, so I will now ask members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committees if they wish to speak by raising their hands. And I'll start with Councillor Mike Allen, please. Councillor Allen, are you there?
I'm just trying to thank you for letting me talk. A question really is as regards these grants. Simon mentioned a 616,000 grant and a separate 700,000 grant, and I'm not sure whether they're different or the same thing. Please excuse my ignorance on that. There is no recommendations yet from the poverty panel. It's been dragging its way through, but there is a significant car park increase and a £5 increase in council tax proposed, 200,000 to do our local plan, which is, I think, completely unnecessary because we only need to revise it, not do a brand new one. And then there's 325,000 for a very extensive carbon reduction programme, or even up to £1 million worth of consultancy over the entire council. I think this comes about because at the end of the day, we've managed to fund any deficits out of reserves. It's not really good enough to take the reserves next year down to 3 million. That's the absolute down limit. And that's why I'm very concerned to ask Simon what the flexibilities with these two grants are and why we haven't actually done what the council asked, which is to poverty proof the whole financial plan. Thank you.
Okay. Simon, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, through the chair. So the grants are completely separate. They are two amounts. One is, as I say, a one-off grant because of the pressures local authorities, district councils are seeing in particular areas, which we are. So that's for the 700,000. There's 600,000, 616 is, if you remember, we've been getting COVID grants this year to help us with additional costs. And what the government have helpfully done is given allocation already for next year in anticipation. So therefore additional costs we might see.
So basically both grants are to cover additional costs that we're anticipating.
The 616 is for additional costs that are unseen at this stage.
Yeah.
I would say the 700,000 is government recognising that in producing budgets for 21-22, district councils will see significant pressure on certain services. So with it already within our budget, we have increased things like homelessness, the refuse and recycling costs, and that 700,000 is to help us deal with those pressures.
So the real question is it a prudential budget?
I would say definitely yes, in that what I haven't done is allocate that 700,000 or the 616 at this stage because they are unknown costs. So that money hasn't been used and will be used as those pressures arise. In terms of the general fund, I think the statement made was around using reserves to balance the budget. That's not what's proposed for 21-22. The draft budget is set as balanced out of existing income. All I'm highlighting is there are possible costs, as you've said, such as the poverty panel, that may come forward with recommendations that haven't been budgeted, and that's why I'm suggesting that the 700,000 could be used to offset some of those costs as they come forward. The budget in the current year was set as balanced for 2021. It's COVID implications that have made in year us have to use reserves, but we've using reserves of about 1.3 million in the current year. that's a necessity and why you hold a general fund balance for those sorts of emergencies. Yes. But you're still maintaining as a council your general fund balance still within that adopted range. Although it's at the bottom end, it's still within the adopted range. What I haven't had to come back to you, which I thought at the beginning of the pandemic I would have to, is set an emergency budget for the current year because your balance would drop below that. But because of government funding, because of work of services, we're in the position whereby we can take from the general fund balance in the current year and still maintain within our adopted level. I think the other points you raised are probably political points for others to answer, if that's okay.
Very practical ones.
Thank you very much, dear Councillor Allen. Councillor Ian Hall, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Simon. Very, very good. Some of the questions have been already answered, primarily the 700,000, the 616,000 that has not yet been allocated. But echoing the words of Councillor Allen, the poverty panel recommendations is going to be something we've got to really focus our minds on here. And furthermore, I must declare my interest as Councillor Moding declared his interest as Cloakham Lawn Sports Centre Chairman, if that can be noted, Chair. So I think that's enough for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Hall. Right, Councillor Brewster Sarum, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Simon. A very positive presentation. Like many members, I was very visibly impressed. I have a couple of very quick points to make. I note that would you say there's a sort of operational funding gap between the grant and the homelessness role that we are creating with the additional staff resources of the 32,000? And if we are using this for the staff resources for homelessness, would that include, as Councillor Chapman has raised at previous meetings, something to do on the lines of a person involved with domestic violence? And my second and final question is that we're looking to develop a poverty dashboard drawing data with the internal systems. Would this be something that the data analysts role we'll be looking at in order that we would get the most out of these? Because I note that we are creating these new roles within the organisation, and I think it's very important that we use their skills and use the grants to get the very best from our resources. So those are my two very quick questions, which I hope you'll be able to give some consideration to. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Simon.
Yep. The homelessness, the additional staffing which was approved through council is being funded in the overall budget. We have been given allocations of funding for next year, which was slightly above our predictions, but not material. So the government have reflected the additional costs in terms of an admin grant. I think that was your question in terms of are they being funded, and yes they are within the overall budget. In terms of dashboarding, dashboard for, and it was mentioned as an action in the poverty action strategy, if you like. Yes, you're quite right, Councillor. That post of analyst is to help with that, exactly that sort of work, so that we can use data in a sensible way and make sure our services are delivered that are most effective. But to gather all that data and present it in an easy style and one that's meaningful does need that IT ability, and that's what that post is for.
Thank you. That was very helpful, Simon.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sarum. Councillor Maddie Chapman, please.
Thank you, Chair, and well done, Simon. Brilliant as usual. As a member of Scrutiny, can I point out, which I'm sure my other Scrutiny members will agree with, when we were started on the car parking TAF and looked through all the car parks, we looked at what the car parks were actually serving and their locations and what the implications were. Now we've had to rush on and all the major car parks along the coast in the towns of the higher category are the ones that are going to get the increases. Now, I am hoping that council will agree that we defer any increases for a year to help the towns when we come out of this pandemic, which I think we're going to need. My problem is that a lot of the car parks, we have not looked as a scrutiny panel or a car parking DAF panel at the functions of these different car parks. And my problem is, and I don't know what other members think about this, that people with permits for, street parking are parking in the car parks all the time. And also the car parks are slightly smaller than the railway car parks. So people that are going on trains are parking in these car parks. And I'm of a mind that council could get more turnover from these car parks if they had shopping car parks limited to a certain amount of time for these businesses, so that you could find somewhere to park, because it's very, very difficult to go down in Exmouth and park in the London Inn car park because it's always full. And to me, it needs to be looked at again, although, it has been agreed, it should, the cost should be put up, but we need to look at the function of these car parks like we have for all the villages and everything else in the district. So I hope council will agree that parking charges be delayed. And also I would like to say that looking at other car parks like the one opposite the pavilions will affect LED, and when you're spending money to help LED, to penalise the car park right opposite the theatre seems a bit short-sighted. I would just like to put that out there, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Simon, did you wish to come back there? No, has he gone?
No, I don't think so, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Steve Gazzard, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you to Simon for his very good report in extreme difficult circumstances that we all find ourselves in. I've just got a couple of questions. On page 20, it states about another 13,000 for an extra member of staff for street scene business support team. Would I be correct in think that is to do with doing all the paperwork and that for events around the district? If it is, obviously there are no events going on council land at the moment, and probably not for the foreseeable future. So is there now the need for that post to be advertised and that expenditure spent on it? I would concur with what a couple of speakers have said already about the increase in car parking charges. I personally would like to see it deferred for the same reasons that people have said, is that we're in the midst of a pandemic. We want to get people to use our high streets and local shops, and the increase could well put them off and see a lot of businesses go under. But I do have something nice to say. I do, and like Simon, really pleased that there's this extra money that is coming from central government. So I thank the government for that, because it wasn't expected, and it will be able to be used to help us through this crisis. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Simon, did you want to comment about the street scene post?
If I can, it's probably more appropriate for Andrew Hancock to comment. I see he's come off mute as well.
No, I've come off mute. I'm ready, Chair, if that's okay. So to answer the councillor's question, yes, the half FTE for the street scene business support and admin team is still needed at the current time. We've seen a huge uplift in demand through the pandemic and previously, and this is across, so it is support for street scene operations in many ways. So the events, you're quite right, the events has tailed off. But it's not directly related to that, although in the supporting papers I do make mention of events. We are looking to take on some work from the Property, Place and Assets team so that they can reutilise some of their surveyor time on sort of higher corporate priorities, and to do that we need some extra support in this team. But there are other things to consider as well, such as property growth. So we've had no increase in resource in this team since 2009. We're seeing property growth all the time. We've passed 71,000 properties now. In our recycling and waste team, we're very well aware of that, and we're, in fact, the item in relation to that team relates to that property growth, and we also need to reflect that in other street scene teams, because more properties, more residents creates more demand on our resources. You'll see in the supporting papers, we've undertaken a system syncing review, hopeful that we could find some efficiencies so that we didn't need to increase the team size. But the review, not yet complete, but so far has underpinned the need to increase resources. One of the big drivers is the work around fleet management and climate change, so the electrification of fleet. And this is requiring a lot of input in specifications and logistics and infrastructure from our budget equipment and monitoring officer. And so she's not able to contend with some of the more basic admin tasks of her role, and that's where we need some extra resource to pick that up. Linked to that, we've had a fleet review from our insurers. It was something they required last year for our renewal. The report has just been delivered to us and we're working through that, but it makes quite a few recommendations for the need to improve how we manage our fleet. And indeed, many authorities of a similar size have a dedicated fleet management post, which we don't have. And so we're making do the best we can with our budget and equipment monitoring officer. And this backfill, this extra resource, just gives us the best chance of success.
Thank you very much, indeed, Andrew. Councillor Gazzard, did you wish to come back on that?
No, Chair, just to say thank you to Andrew for that in-depth response.
Okay, all right, good. Thank you very much. Councillor Fabian King, please.
Thank you, Chair. I only mention this point because it's been raised 3 times by other members about the car parking recommendations or possibilities of increasing the car parking fee by 20 pence and postponing that. And I just want to ask that we see the bigger picture. I quite understand the aspirations to avoid spending, to avoid having expenditure. I'm sorry, can you? I'm sorry for that disturbance. If I can start again, I do apologise. There's a recommendation made 3 times to postpone the increase in car parking charges. I want to try and bring forward a sense of proportion. Whilst the council is effectively besieged financially from many sides, I think that 20 pence for a shopping trip is not a large amount of money. The sense of proportion I want to bring into play is that the expenditure of a car journey into a town to do some shopping is far in excess of 20p. So get that proportion into place, please. The amount of money spent on a shopping trip just for the sake of shopping is out of all proportion to the cost of 20p on parking a car. So please bring that sense of proportion into play. The amount of 300,000 revenue increase to the council's budget is of huge significance compared to 20p to park a car. So on those 3 counts, please, cost of a journey, cost of shopping spend, and the increase in revenue to the council, I think those really should be considered very carefully, because the in-year risks we have are really quite severe on this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Let's try not to stray too much to the car park TAF area, but I do realise it has a big impact on budgets. Councillor Marcus Hartnell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've just got a question concerning public conveniences, which show a saving of just over 60,000 versus our costs for the previous financial year or current financial year. So I'm just wondering where those savings are coming from. Is that because we still have some toilets closed? It's probably one for Andrew Hancock.
If I can come back, I don't know if Andrew's Do you want to answer? Sorry, Andrew.
Well, yes, I can answer, Simon, and as I'm sure you can. It's related to business rates relief in the main that government announced last year. I think, and Simon can correct me, that totals about 40-odd thousand.
Correct. Yeah.
Which is reflected in the budget there. So we no longer have to pay business rates for our public toilets, which was always a bit of a strange one. But also, as you surmise, some savings in running costs, utilities, water costs for the toilets that are still closed. I should mention that is offset in the current year by the huge additional cost of the extra COVID cleaning that we're carrying out in the toilets currently.
Thank you. Okay.
Can I just come back there, Chair, if that's okay?
Yes, quickly. Yes, please. Yes.
So in terms of what was presented earlier, we said obviously that frontline services were being largely unaffected this new year. Are we aiming to get all the public conveniences back up and running as soon as possible?
I think I caught the most of that, Councillor, and if I may, through the chair. We're still looking at what we can do with public toilets going into the future. And in my June Cabinet report about street scene services and the additional costs we needed for public toilet cleaning, Cabinet agreed to a review of public toilet provision, which we're working on currently. The problem we still have, and we're still grappling with operationally, is if we open those remaining toilets that are still closed, at the moment, we will need to clean those on the enhanced cleaning schedules that we've set out for the ones that are open, which is currently costing us in the order of 60,000 additional in staffing costs, because as you know, we're cleaning them 4 times a day, 3 times a day in the winter, sorry. So we still have a big funding ask there if we were just to open them as normal. And as our public toilet review will touch on when we deliver it to Cabinet, a capital refurbishment or rebuild cost to make those COVID secure also. We also will have to come in year with a consideration when we know what's happening with lockdown as to when we stop the enhanced cleaning or how long we continue it, because there's nothing built into the new financial year's budget for that enhanced cleaning as it stands.
Thank you. Okay, right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Coleman, please.
Right, so a couple of issues. One's about this 700,000 grant, LTSD. I think it's very welcome. But I was thinking there's quite a lot of people have actually fallen through the gaps, especially in this pandemic. There's been an increased food bank demand. You've seen it in Exmouth. There was a presentation at the Exmouth Council 2 days ago for our food bank about making clear some of the concerns. I was wondering whether some of this money could go to help directly people who have basically fallen through the gaps with the help with COVID. People have lost their businesses or lost their jobs and perhaps don't qualify for furlough or even be forced to use food bank for one reason or another. So I'd like to see at least some of that money go to people who perhaps not been quite so lucky with government grants. The second point I was going to make is about car parking. I realise nobody likes paying charges, but you've got to raise the money somewhere. As my colleague said, I think 20p extra for a trip to town is very, very small change from reality. And I think, remember, we're in a climate emergency. Remember how great the streets were back in March, where a few people actually got out the cars. I think we do need some incentive for people to switch away from cars to other methods of transport, whether they're bikes or walking or potentially online. And I think we've got to. That's part. So I support the 20p increase. A very modest increase. To be honest, I think it's should be part of a long-term process. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Coleman. Councillor Maddie Chapman again, please. Just keep it to the point,
yes.
please.
Yes. Thank you. On the car parking charges and everyone saying that it's 20p, that's fine. But if you don't encourage people back into the town centre from online and out stores, then you're going to lose money in business rates. So, you know, I think that would be really, really, really sad. So I just wanted to flag that up. And also on the toilets, Exmouth Town Council has been paying towards the cost of cleaning the railway station and the rec toilets. We were under the impression that other towns were also paying towards the cost of cleaning. Is that not the case? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Simon, can you advise us on that one, please? Simon?
Yeah, sorry, I thought Andrew was going to come in again.
I can do.
There's a mixture. I think members will know there is a mixture of where local councils are, town and parishes are meeting those costs, and in areas they're not. It was whereby, and Andrew will remind me, but where we identified a number of years ago particular public conveniences that we were looking at reducing costs and perhaps consider closing, and we went to parishes and towns to see whether they wanted to support them, and some parishes and towns came back with that positive request, and that's the position as it is at the moment.
Just quickly, Chair, if I may, to follow up on that, I think Councillor Chapman's asking about the current funding of additional toilet opening for the COVID enhanced cleaning. And yes, Exmouth Town Council very kindly have agreed to fund those. We suggested an initial amount of toilets that we could afford to open, and some town councils have come forwards and said they want more open, and where that's the case, they are funding it. So Sidmouth and Seaton are also funding additional toilet opening. Where that isn't the case, we've just got our original list that we proposed in that earlier cabinet report.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Ian Hall, please.
Thank you, Chair. I don't sound like a broken record, but some of our high streets are having enough trouble staying alive. We have so many initiatives really trying to get some additional traction, like the totally localies. We've got to kickstart our economy as soon as possible. The business rates will come with it. I can't sit by and just see an increase in parking charges. It's not going to help get us as communities to help ourselves going forward. This is short-sighted. We need to do, at the very minimum, defer this, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, right. Thank you very much. I understand car parking and the public toilets is a very contentious issue, but we must really stick to the issue about the budget. I see no further hands raised. Can I therefore ask, please, if someone would like to make a provisional recommendation onto the budget as presented to the committees? Can I see some hands, please, if someone who would wish to make a provisional recommendation? Councillor Fabian King, please. Councillor King.
I beg your pardon. Thank you. Yes, I recommend this as a provisional, but I beg your pardon, a provisional recommendation. Is that the way round?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, I think it is excellent. I think the thoroughness with which Simon has tackled I referred to the siege earlier on. I think it is excellent. It is comprehensive and very detailed. I hope that it will go through. So I provisionally recommend it.
Thank you. Okay. I see Councillor Brenda Taylor has a hand up. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
You can. I would like to second Fabian King's proposals for accepting this budget. I think Simon's done a brilliant job getting in such detail. It's very comprehensive. Thank you for that. And I'd like to second this proposal.
Thank you very much indeed. I see no further hands, so therefore I'm going to ask Henry if he would confirm, please, the provisional recommendations.
So thank you, Chair. Because this is two committees members, we will take the vote separately in relation to each of the committees. You will be asked, members will probably be aware of the issues we now have in relation to the green tick, red cross imposed. So our approach is going to be asking you to vote by raising your electronic hand. You will be asked whether you are in favour of the proposal, and then separately whether you are against it or whether you abstain, and that will happen in relation to each committee. So the first vote will be for the overview committee. So for the 12 members of that committee, please can you raise your electronic hand if you are in favour of the motion as proposed, please. Thank you. So I can see that that's carried, although despite the instructions not to use green tick, red cross, that didn't seem to happen. So please can we stick to using the electronic hands on the vote, because the green tick, red cross will disappear after a period of time, so your vote won't necessarily be recorded. So can we stick to electronic hands, please? So anybody voting against the proposal, please, sorry, just clear the hands down. So anybody voting against the proposal, please raise your electronic hand. 1 against, 2 against. Thank you. Can we clear that one, please? Are there any abstentions, please? No, thank you. So that's carried as far as the overview committee is concerned. If we can move on to the scrutiny committee, please. All those in favour of the proposal, if you can please raise your electronic hand.
Henry, can I just clarify, it's Councillor Johns, as I'm on both committees, do
Yes.
I vote twice?
Yes,
Thank
you get 2 votes. So all those in favour of raising their hands, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that is 10 in favour. Can we clear the hands, please? Anybody voting against, please? Can you raise your electronic hand? There are none. And anybody abstaining, if you can raise your electronic hand, please. Okay, there are none. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. They are both carried. Oh, sorry, the motions are carried from both committees.
Thank you very much indeed, Henry. Okay, right. Moving on to agenda item 8, the key service plan objectives, 2021 to 2022, pages 30 to 175 on your agenda. The purpose of this item is to provide members with an update on key service plan objectives. This meeting will consider the following services: countryside and leisure, environmental health and car parks, housing and street scene. The remaining services will be considered at session 2 of this committee meeting tomorrow. To manage this meeting smoothly and for the benefit of those watching, I propose that recommendations for each service plan be agreed after discussion of that item. Also, in view of the current situation with the COVID-19 pandemic, the size of the agenda and the need to allow democratic service officers to record the meeting accurately, I propose that if members wish to debate in detail a wider issue relating to a service plan, that members state that they have serious concerns about this item to me as chair. I will then ask other members of the committee to raise their electronic hands if they agree with this concern. If I find that 5 or more electronic hands are raised, then the identified concerns will be noted and discussed at subsequent overview or scrutiny meetings. Thank you. The service leads to present the report. We have countryside and leisure, Charlie Plowden, environmental health and car parks, Andrew Ennis, housing, Joe Garford, and street scene, Andrew Hancock. Okay, so can I first ask Charlie Plowden to present the service plan for countryside and leisure? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. I'm going to try the impossible, if it's okay, Chair, just to put one slide up on the screen, just to help focus some of the discussion. So if that's okay, I'm going to try and do that.
Yes.
Now. Thank you. It says hosted stable participant screen sharing, so it's an immediate fail. So apologies for that. What I wanted to do was sort of highlight the challenges that are facing my particular service areas and the lessons that we've learned from the implications of COVID. And I think they're very pertinent going into next year to how we can actually have confidence in delivering a service plan. I think the first area that I want to touch on is around the sort of post-COVID behaviours that we've seen in the last 12 months. I think what's clear is that our green spaces, and I'm talking about nature reserves, country parks, parks and gardens, have more than proven their importance and value to local communities during the lockdown. And I think it's fair to say there's been a considerable renaissance of people reconnecting with nature and all the benefits that this brings with mental and physical well-being. So one of the challenges we've certainly got in countryside and leisure, and I'm pretty sure it's same with Andrew in street scene, is that we continue to invest in our green spaces, but also look to create new green spaces, because I think it's fair to say that we're going to be having to deal with future lockdowns for certainly this coming year, financial year, and perhaps beyond. So I think that in terms of financial and resource challenges very much uppermost in our minds. I think in the lockdowns we've certainly seen the changes in the way we interact within our service with our key audiences. It's become much more digitally led, the use of online platforms taking activities into people's homes, and I think that's something we need to continue to invest in again with the year ahead, to ensure that we are still very much engaged with our audiences across the whole district, and that's a commitment that we put into our service plan, with delivering those sort of online educational videos, etc., to engage both from an educational but also a wider interest perspective. Also, in terms of capitalising on the behavioural changes, I think we have at our disposal some technological advances that Strata have put into place. I think we've got an opportunity now to look at those and see how we can better utilise areas such as AI and using platforms such as Alexa that can certainly help us to market and promote our event activities, and the use of contactless payments out on site. I think it's fair to say that pretty much everybody now is using their credit cards to make purchases, and certainly our donations have taken a bit of a hit, particularly out on the Seaton wetlands, where they have been cash-based up until now. So just an investment in our technology to enable us to continue to receive donations, which we know that visitors to our nature reserves are certainly keen to do, and continue to help support the activities that we carry out on our nature reserves. So using AI and technology can really help us continue to engage with the way that our audiences are sort of using different sorts of technology. Also, we've taken considerable time to think through how we can reimagine some of the public events that we're delivering. I think it's been touched upon in the discussion already about a number of events that have had to be put on hold, and a review as to how they may look going forward. I think it's fair to say when it came out of the first lockdown, we changed the style and the feel of our events, so they were a lot more bespoke and niche, but bookable within family bubbles, and we're following the guidance that's given by government. They were all fully booked out within 24, 48 hours, and I think we need to look at how we continue to sort of deliver our public events, bearing in mind that the residual impact of the virus is still going to be there, and we've got to instill and restore confidence with our key audiences. And I think perhaps certainly for the next 12 months, those big public gatherings, certainly that and events that we deliver within Countryside and within the gallery are probably not going to be particularly well received. So I think, again, in terms of how we deliver those events, that's going to have an impact on our income, certainly for the next sort of 12 months. And I've raised that with Simon, and that's reflected in our budget, where we've probably given a much more conservative feel to the income targets we set for our public events program. So it's working with our sort of audiences and trying to work out how best to continue to engage and educate and inspire, etc., with them. So those are the sort of the post-COVID lessons, Chair, that I think we've sort of picked up within the service. And finally, from me, the really sort of big area that is coming down the track this spring is going to be hopefully the long-awaited Environment Act. There are a number of new duties within that act that local authorities are going to have to pick up. A duty for local planning authorities to deliver a biodiversity net gain, which is going to see a much greater emphasis on delivering wildlife gains linked to new developments, with payments up front from developers. And I know Ed Freeman, Service Lead for planning, has picked this up, and it's in Simon's budget for a district ecologist post, and I think that's absolutely critical that we're able to meet that new challenge. Also within the Act, there is going to be duty for us to prepare a local nature recovery plan that will set out how we can restore degraded wildlife corridors, look at improving water and soil quality issues, and also to help our communities to reconnect with nature. So a lot of really big challenges, statutory challenges, mandatory challenges that are coming downstream within this Act. What they're signalling in terms of how we can do that, government have signalled that there will be a sort of new burdens payment. We're not sure how much that will be, but that could certainly help to alleviate some of the costs that Simon's identified with the district ecology post and preparing the local nature recovery plan. So there's some sort of fiscal stimulus incentive there that's been provided by government, we believe. But obviously, devil's in the detail with that, so we'll find out more around about springtime. But within my particular service plan area, we're already forging ahead with our Wild Towns programme, which is very much looking at nature recovery and rewilding at the heart of what we're trying to do within those programmes. So the Wild Exmouth project is already up and running. We're looking to kickstart the Wild Honiton project as soon as we come out of this lockdown. And we're looking to roll out that programme across the whole of the district, across all of our towns in due course. So there's a lot for us to consider in terms of impacts of COVID and the lessons that we've learned from that, and that's reflected in the service plan, but also reacting to new duties that are likely to come downstream, as I said, to us as a local authority, and how we can put our natural environment and reconnecting our communities with nature going forward, which I think is reflected, well, I know it's reflected in the statement of intent that's been put out by the new political leadership group. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Charlie. Okay, first of all, I will ask any non-members who may wish to speak. Councillor Jeff Young, please.
Thank you, Chair. As portfolio, I'd like to thank the fantastic work the countryside team have done over this very challenging year. Basically reinvent themselves over this emergency. Being in our wonderful countryside has never been so appreciated by the public. In future years, for the requirements of the possible staycations that people are going to have, there will be added pressure on our coasts, our countryside and our parks. And I welcome the proposal for an ecologist, which will give a very important addition to the countryside team. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Okay, right, so are there any members of the two committees that wish to speak? I can't see any hands raised. Oh, yes, I can. Councillor Brewster-Sarum, please.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Good morning. One very good presentation, Charlie. I've just got a couple of very quick questions. How fast will you do the rollout of the green space maps for each household in the town? How quickly can that be rolled out, and do you think you'll need any additional support for that? And could you tell us maybe in a very as briefly as you can about the further pilot for this wild swimming for 2 towns for the over 55? So that's something that I would welcome some thought on, and I'd be grateful to hear your thoughts, Charlie. Thank you.
Thank you. Charlie.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just responding to that, we're looking to roll out the green space map as part of the Wild Exmouth project. I think Councillor de Serum's talking about. That is planned to come out this spring. So I know work's already underway by Tim Dafford to get that done. So there should be some good news on that fairly shortly, and I'll get him to liaise directly with you, Councillor, on that. And on the wild swimming, also I'll get him to update you on. I'm not sure when that's actually been launched. I know the plans are in place, and we've been able to draw funding from the Connecting Actively to Nature and Sport England funding to help support that, and working very closely with Active Devon and LED to make that happen, because the pilot we did in Sidmouth has been hugely successful and massively oversubscribed. So there's real potential to roll that whole programme out across our coastal communities as well. But I'll get my respective team leaders to update you on those, Bruce. Thank you.
Thanks, that's most helpful.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Charlie, and Councillor de Serum. Councillor Steve Gazzard, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was going to ask a question on the wild swimming, but that's been answered. Thank you very much. I really welcome the tree strategy. And is it possible, can you tell me whether this ecologist that is going to be appointed, is it going to be attached to the countryside team?
It's been discussed at the moment where that post is relevant. I know it's discussion that Chief Exec has had with strategic lead for housing and environment and street scene. I'm sorry, John, I keep forgetting your extensive titles. I know that discussion is ongoing, so hopefully it will be resolved fairly soon. So, but the good news is that it will be a fantastic addition to the council, wherever that post sits. But obviously, be delighted if it's sat within my service area. But yeah, well, it's a thumbs up all round.
Thank you. It makes sense to me if it was to go to your side, but that's just my personal view.
Okay, right. Thank you very much. Councillor Helen Parr, please.
Thank you. Yes, I'm looking at the service plan, and there's a section about Seaton wetlands. I'm slightly concerned. You're going to create a cafe offer and installation of countless payment points and car machine payments and resurfacing of the car park. I do think we have to be extremely careful. This is a wild wetlands area, and we don't want to kill the thing we love with huge amounts of infrastructure. And I mean, car park resurfacing, it's perfectly good. I go there often. I'm anxious that we're going to end up with destroying this wild place. And I think people go there because it's wild. So I do think we have to be very careful. Could you comment on that, please, Charlie?
Thank you, through the chair. Just to reassure Councillor Parr, it's part of the sort of ongoing sort of maintenance for the wetlands. We've seen in the last 5-6 years, I think I said before, we've had visitor, which is fantastic, visitor footfall increase from sort of around 30 to 40,000 up to 60, 65,000 this year. And with the lockdown, as I'm sure you're aware, it's never been busier down on the wetlands, and it's proven its sort of value as a community green space as much as anything else for people to sort of get out within Seaton and Colliton and Colliford and Axmouth, amongst many other local communities. So the issue we've got there is, without going into sort of technical detail, the surfacing is very broken up, and as you're probably aware, we have a lot of elderly and less abled users who, when they get out of the car, they find it incredibly difficult to get from the car actually onto the sort of surface footpath area. So we're not looking to in any way increase the area of car parking. It's just to actually make it a much more usable surface, particularly for those users, which we've seen a huge increase on that. And acutely aware of what you're saying about not urbanizing the feel of the site, because you're absolutely right. We don't want to sort of destroy the very thing that people are drawn to in the first place. So rest assured, we're not looking to do that. On the contactless payments, that comes back to my earlier point. As you're probably aware, we've got donation points already set up on the site, and because of the issue about our users, our various audiences not carrying cash anymore, we've seen a massive fall in terms of the donations, and we're responding to that with the sort of what people are paying now, which is obviously contactless. And we've had a number of comments from our regular users who are still, which is great, still very keen to help donate towards the ongoing management, and the improvements that we're planning to make on the site. So contactless seems to be the way we need to move forward, on that. So it's not, again, sort of putting loads of sort of contactless machines all across the site. It's just replacing the existing ones with contactless facilities. So just to reassure you on that. In terms of the cafe offer, it sounds rather grand, but it's not. It's we're looking to put in a small concessionary cafe offer there. We've seen a huge growth in terms of particularly young families who go down to the wetlands, you know, with their toddlers. And again, we've done some preliminary sort of investigations on how that would work and how it would sort of fit in with that sort of visitor experience. And we've sort of come back and that it's been mentioned that that's something that's missing when people go down there. They would like to have that sort of dwell time, and a small discreet sort of cafe offer fits in really well with what we're trying to do there, without, I hope, detracting from the, as you said, the sort of the natural feel of the site overall. I think also I'm acutely aware we've got this sort of pressure that you all know about how we can continue to look to bring in income to help support the activities, not just on the wetlands, but across, you know, all of our nature reserves. And the Seaton Wetlands being our flagship site, and the success of that site helps underpin some of the other management costs that we are having to put towards the management of our other nature reserves. So it's helping us to do all the fantastic sort of conservation work we're looking to do across all our sites. And I think that with the tram halt that's looking to go in this month, that's going to bring another 10 to 15,000 visitors on site. So it's going to get busy, busy, busy. And we're just trying to work with our audiences to provide the right sort of visitor infrastructure and facilities to continue to make it such a great experience for people. And I hope that the cafe offer, it sounds like it's incongruous with what we're trying to do there, but actually fits really, really well with what we're trying to do there. And it won't detract from the wildness of the site. And happily, once we've got that in place or some ideas to talk through with you, to reassure you that we're on the right track, that would help.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Eleanor Rylance, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Charlie, for your report. It's a really good report. I like it. I like a lot of these plans. I did want to pay tribute particularly to the Villages in Action mention. And I know that a lot of people really appreciate the offer of Villages in Action. But my question to you is, I mean, I presume that most of the Villages in Action events last year were cancelled because they tend to take place in village halls and be generally indoor events. What do you think our plans are for this coming year? And are we more in the planning stages for when we can resume indoor events? Because I think if my village is anything to go by, most village halls at the moment are mothballed because we can't run events safely in them because of the all the restrictions, COVID restrictions. So are we planning events for 2022, or are we thinking that we might be able to start again in 2021? Because it's looking fairly unlikely to me at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. Just simple answer, absolutely committed to continuing the programme for next year. I've got a meeting actually with the Villages in Action team in the next couple of weeks. I'm hoping to report the outcomes from that at the next Arts and Culture Forum, which is planned, I think, end of Feb, early March. So I might actually invite them to come along and just update. They've done an options appraisal they want to talk through. They were able to do a couple of events, I know, during the summer when restrictions were eased, but obviously then we went into lockdown 2. So that rather sort of kibosh what they were hoping to do. But yeah, absolutely, they're, you know, ready to go, keen to work with us and to continue to deliver, as you say, a really important outreach, touring, rural touring, creative arts programs. So 100%, yes, very, very supportive.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Jack Rowland, please.
Thanks, Chair. As I chaired the capital allocations panel, I just wanted to reassure Councillor Parr regarding the Seaton Wetlands car park, that it was considered really to be very much maintenance work for that car park, because I know when it is either very wet or very dry, it does cause issues. So it's certainly not extending it. So I'd just like to reinforce what Charlie said in terms of, I think that's a well well thought out proposal about resurfacing the car park, because I think it will actually serve to bring people back once they've made an initial visit, perhaps for the first time, and attract more visitors. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Marcus Hartnell, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start by thanking Charlie actually for all his hard work, and we really do appreciate the resource that we have on our doorstep here in Seaton, in the Seaton wetlands, and it really is a flagship site, and I know it is the envy of many others in East Devon. I'd like to echo though the points that Councillor Parr has raised, in that we do need to strike a very fine balance here between maintaining the natural environment, but also trying to increase our revenue streams, and obviously making sure that the wetlands are open and accessible for all. One of the things I'd just like to ask Charlie, understand a little bit more of it, would be how the car park will be managed going forward, with all the increased visitors that we're anticipating, particularly where we've got the new tram halt coming online this year, and many other initiatives that are all looking to increase footfall on the wetlands. The car park is going to get very, very busy, and I note from the service plan that you're suggesting that we have a car parking machine for donations, and I'm just wondering, is this the first step towards a full sort of pay and display car park, which I suspect may be justified at some point in the future in order to try and manage the increased number of vehicles, and obviously to look at income. So I'm just wondering what Charlie's thoughts are on that, and possibly how this car park will be managed as we get busier and busier. Thank you.
Thank you. Charlie.
Thank you, through the chair. I know Simon's eyes lit up about the car parking sort of charging, but however, to reassure you, when we created that car park, we received funding for our European grant, and that was heavily conditioned that it wasn't going to be a paid car park. And I know that issue's been raised over many years, so we're not looking to put in a paid car park arrangement, and we believe that actually through a sort of voluntary donations approach, that is the way forward, because obviously we're acutely aware that we're providing the wetlands for everyone to enjoy, and that's obviously a very strong part of our sort of remit. And through the other opportunities as they go on site, to put voluntary donations once they get on site, to hire pond dipping equipment, through to attending some of our paid public events, through to hopefully a tasteful small cafe offer, we should be able to recoup sort of income to reinvest back into the site. So that's the sort of 360 approach we're looking at, for that site management. In terms of, yes, I think you're right, with the increase in visitor numbers, and we've seen sort of periodically through the year, where the car park's absolutely rammed, and we're very mindful, obviously, it's setting next to a cemetery and being able to work very closely there with Andrew's team within street scenes. So I think that is an issue. I think the game changer could be with the completion of the Stopline Way cycle route that effectively connects the sort of south with the north, and for us to be able to encourage people to park in the southern end. That would help obviously see Jurassic, the tram, etc., and get people to explore the whole site, starting their journey from the southern end and not relying on just coming to park where we are at the moment. So I think some careful messaging and some good marketing promotional work and joining up with the tram and seeing Jurassic should help to alleviate some of those sort of parking issues. But I think what we don't know is, what is the limit in terms of the footfall, because we've seen year-on-year growth down there. So, we may need to come back and revisit this one during the course of the next sort of 12 to 18 months, if it really does become an issue, and look how we sort of, work collaboratively to sort of together with the main attractions, but also with Andrew Ennis in car parking, obviously with Andrew Hancock in street scene as well, with the specific issues there with the cemetery. So I think we can come to a solution. At the moment, it's a nice headache, but it could become, further down the track, a much bigger headache for us if the numbers become too great. So we'll certainly work with ward members on that as well, very closely.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Councillor Andrew Moulding, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair, for allowing me to come back at this time. I didn't step in earlier, but it just occurred to me that I hear Simon say in his earlier report that there was intending to be a leisure strategy created, and if so, did Charlie have that within his report? And if so, are there any costs involved with the creation of a leisure strategy that maybe should have been included in the budget at some stage?
Shall I take that one, Simon? Yes, it was one of the recommendations that came through with the recent Leisure Monitoring Forum, whereby we were looking to bring in, which we have already now commissioned consultants to effectively help to audit the monthly accounts that are coming through from LED to ensure there's transparency and an open book approach. And the other recommendation was to develop a leisure strategy and to appoint external consultants to pull that together, working with LED to make sure that we have the right framework for the strategy. So in terms of costs, I think it's fair to say, unless Simon knows, it's unknown at the moment, but there's an act of we need to go out and understand what kind of strategy we want, and obviously how we can deliver that, and then obviously the costs that will sort of flow from that. I don't know if Simon wants to add anything more to it.
Right, okay, thank you very much indeed. Right, I see no more hands, therefore I'm going to ask if a member would care to make a proposal regarding this particular, the Countryside and Leisure Service Plan. Councillor Steve Gazzard, please.
Yes, I'd like to propose that we accept the plan as set out, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. May I have a seconder, please?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Vicky Johns. Right, okay. Henry, can you just go through the recommendation, please?
Yes, certainly, Chair. So as before, members, separate vote for overview and for scrutiny. The proposal is to accept the service plan for Countryside as is written. So overview, if using your electronic hands, can all those in favour please raise their electronic hands now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We shouldn't have 13 unless I've miscounted. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's unanimously carried. So we move on to the scrutiny committee, please, if you can clear the hands down.
Henry?
Yeah.
Did I see a member of scrutiny voting then on the overview?
Well, I counted 12 the second time.
Okay, no problem.
So for the scrutiny committee now then, can all those in favour please show their electronic hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's 11 in favour. Can those against please show their hands? We clear the hands down. That is 1 against. So that's that matter concluded as well. So service plan is carried by both committees. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Charlie, for that. Okay, so we move on now to environmental health and car parks with Andrew Ennis. Good morning, Andrew. Are you there?
I hope so. My computer seems to be a little slow. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, thank you.
Marvellous. Okay, thank you. I we'll present in two sections. I'm hearing, I think, from members already that the car parks element of my service plan might be more of interest or might stimulate more debate. So if I could deal with the environmental health services first, then I'll introduce car parking. What I would like guidance on, do you want me to deal with them separately and have a debate after each section, or would you like me to present the whole thing first, Chair?
Well, let's do environmental health first. I mean, car parks is clearly very contentious. We don't want to have a huge debate about car parks. We simply, I think, note that and refer it back to the car parking TAF. But clearly, there's great warmth of feeling about that. So let's start with environmental health anyway.
Okay. So yeah, great pleasure to introduce to you the environmental health service plan for the coming year. We've got a huge amount of work on. We've got much of our business as usual. We're involved in a whole range of things, most planning applications. We look at the environmental impact and try to ensure that's mitigated before developments even.
Oh, have we lost him?
Chair, I just unmuted myself. The system said I had been muted by the host. Am I coming through again?
Yes, you are. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, so I was just covering the sort of business as usual licensing, planning consultations. That is a huge amount of the environmental health team's work, along with routine inspections for food hygiene, for environmental protection, for air quality management. We do a whole load of monitoring around the district. All of that work continues in some detail and at pace. But on top of all of that, we've got the kind of high profile work at the moment with the pandemic. Of course, environmental health services are core to much of that, looking not only at the well-being of our communities, particularly the clinically extremely vulnerable members of our communities, but also our own staff. We're very much focused on our own business continuity plans and thinking about keeping our staff well. We're working with NHS and County Council on a whole load of COVID testing options, along with the vaccination programme itself. So you would have seen a number of test sites coming and going. There's a mobile COVID test site back in Honiton this week. It opened this morning. We'll be looking at further testing for asymptomatic individuals. This is the lateral flow testing that should be rolled out next month for people who remain at work. So it's a preventive measure. So we've been instrumental in that. On top of all that, our environmental health teams are perhaps doing fewer routine food hygiene inspections, but they're absolutely engaged with businesses in terms of how they can survive, frankly, and how they can develop into, say, a food takeaway, and how they can operate in a safe, COVID secure manner at the moment, and plan to reopen hopefully around Easter and beyond in terms of planning to get back to normal. Our corporate health and safety role is massive. Every site visit we take now is subject to a dynamic risk assessment. You know, we've got to ask ourselves, we carry on providing really important regulatory services and services to communities, but is it safe for our staff to do it? So every single one, we work from home where we can, but if we can't work from home, we might have to go on site, and we have to do that in a safe way. The last year, we've seen a 50% hike in our neighbour complaints, particularly antisocial behaviour. The teams are really busy, and I'm surmising that's largely down to people spending more time in their own homes. They're working at home, they're playing at home, and there's a level of tolerance, but that level of tolerance, I think, is diminishing, and there's a level of inconsiderate behaviour out there in our communities. And frankly, it's the environmental health teams who have to get involved between neighbours and try to get some sort of resolution. and it's huge. Looking forward, we've got a lot more to do now with our climate emergency action plan, and particularly the way we move around the district, and putting our own house in order, looking at our staff commutes and our staff business journeys is a challenge for sure. And our work with the poverty panel, I think, is important. A lot of environmental health services are core services that either are already helping people who are living in some level of poverty, and in some cases may help to improve their situation, improve their life choices. Probably that's a reasonable overview, I think, of environmental health and where we've got to. In summary, it's business as usual, plus an awful lot more work at the moment because of the pandemic. So should I pause there with environmental health to see what questions we have?
Okay, thank you. So any non-members wish to speak about environmental health? Yeah, I have Councillor Eleanor Rylance.
Chair, I am a member of Scrutiny. Hello, I am a member of Scrutiny. Do you wish me to speak? I'm a member of Scrutiny. Or do you want to wait?
No, you better wait for a moment. We better wait for a
non-members.
moment. Okay, right, non-members. Councillor Jeff Young, please.
Yeah, as portfolio holder, again, I would like to thank the team at the environmental health over this very difficult year. They've done magnificently. Two issues: antisocial behaviour. Possibly we need to review our approach and see if there's anything that we can help the team with that. And the other issue is increase in pest reporting. So pest control again needs to have possible investment to provide further staff levels for this very important aspect of the area. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Young. Okay, so members of the committees then, back to Councillor Eleanor Rylance, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I think you've done extraordinary jobs in a very difficult year, and I wanted to pay tribute to you for that. The other thing I did want to say as well is that I believe that most people are observing lockdown rules adequately, pretty well. And I think in the news we tend to get reports of people who are not observing lockdown rules, but I think the vast majority of people are doing their utmost to abide by them. So we end up being faced with the people who aren't, so it can seem quite depressing at times. But I do believe that most people are observing lockdown rules. The other thing I did want to say as an aside is that in a Guardian article the other day, it would appear that Devon is among the 3 lowest local authorities in terms of the people who have been exposed to COVID, which means that 95% of our population has not yet been exposed to COVID. We are 3rd from the bottom in that table. So it's actually incredibly crucial that we keep doing this vital public service of encouraging people to abide by lockdown, because if 95% of the population has not yet been exposed, that's 95% of the population that's still vulnerable to it. And so even though it may seem like this is dragging on and on and on, and indeed it is, it's more crucial for us and for the other local authorities stuck right at the bottom that we keep being sensible. So thank you on an ongoing basis for what you and your team do, Andrew. And that's all I really wanted to say, other than to point out that, we are still very vulnerable in Devon to COVID.
Thank you. Andrew, did you wish to comment about that?
Thank you, Chair. Just to respond, thank you, Councillor Rylance. That's really nice to hear those sorts of comments. For clarity, yes, we do an awful lot more work supporting businesses who are asking for our advice than we do enforcement work. We have had 1 or 2 issues with businesses perhaps have been doing things they shouldn't, and we've had to get involved, engage with them, provide education and support, but so far we haven't had to take any formal action. And again, for clarity, the environmental health role is primarily working with businesses. The compliance of individuals, the way people behave in their own homes, is a matter for police. This is how we split the enforcement work. So we'll very happily give advice, but the focus on our work is about businesses rather than individuals.
Thank you very much indeed. Now I have a number of members who've raised their hands. They will be called in this order: Councillor Coleman, Councillor de Sarum, Councillor Allen, Councillor Gazzard and Councillor Wright. Thank you. So Councillor Andrew Coleman, please.
Hello. Yeah, I welcome these proposals for environmental health, particularly for greener East Devon. It says to work across the council to identify opportunities to reduce the impact of our activities, including reductions in both commuting and business miles travelled by the implementation of our green travel plan. I assume this will cover council activities directly, like council meetings. See how successful actually the switch from physical meeting to Zoom has been, with a little bit of education. I hope this will carry on when COVID is gone, that we will not go back to making wasted journeys. So I hope there will be a commitment here to keep remote meetings when we can. Right, let's have some physical meetings occasionally, but not go back to, not that there won't be a return to normal in a few months' time. Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Bruce de Sarum.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a very stimulating report, Andrew. I was going to touch on what you already touched on, the antisocial behaviour issues, and I note that the portfolio holder mentioned that we would have a review, and I would hope that we would put that forward as one of the recommendations from Scrutiny and Overview today, that we would have this review, because I think that although you said people behaviour is an issue for the police, clearly it could be covered as part of the corporate health plan, that we would do health and safety training and making people aware of their rights and responsibilities. So I noticed that we don't necessarily have something in the budget for this. So I wonder if we could make a recommendation to put something aside. And as I said, I note what you say, that the people behaviour is for the police. So obviously we've got a pest control. I know we've got the pest control individual in the budget. So I'm wondering if we could perhaps, make some incorporation of that. And I wonder if members would be able to support my thoughts on that, given that I also saw somewhere that we would work with a member champion for mental health to consider the options around an officer role to support the council's commitment. So there is perhaps support to give an additional support for an officer for one of these particular areas. And I think with the lockdown and everything else, clearly antisocial behaviour is a key topic, because you said it yourself in the report, there is a level of tolerance to which people won't accept. So I welcome your thoughts, and I wonder whether members would support me in suggesting additional resources to look into this, as the portfolio holder has said.
Okay. Andrew, did you want to comment on that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Councillor de Sarum. Absolutely. I mean, additional resources are always welcome, but to be absolutely fair with you, we've just put some resource back into the team from existing resources. It's extra capacity we were going to devote to climate emergency, but we've pulled it back. So we're just about to employ another member in the team to focus exclusively on tackling antisocial behaviour over the coming year, and that's within existing budgets. So at the moment, I'm not asking for anything in addition, but we are going to focus for the reasons you've said. And absolutely, the police have their role, particularly with non-compliance with COVID matters. But if an individual is behaving inconsiderately at home, that's very much in play for us and for our enforcement role, involving nuisance or community protection notices and so on, using the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act powers that we've had on the statute book for some time. So it's absolutely something we focus on. And if neighbours are being inconsiderate and upsetting their near residential neighbours, we do have the resources and the powers to get involved, and that's something which I think over the coming year we need to do more of for the reasons I've outlined, particularly the upturn in antisocial behaviour service requests over the last year.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Mike Allen, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to echo what Councillor Rylance said about the dangers of the current situation. I think even when we're all vaccinated, there are still going to be some who don't vaccinate, and we're going to have still deaths and problems. So your team is critically important. And I mean, I can't imagine
handling 5,500 calls. It's huge what you've been doing. What I was surprised about was there's only 528 specifically labelled as coronavirus in your list. So I'm sure that's understated. The second thing is, I don't know how much difficulty you've had making sure that homes are suitable. Poor quality housing, especially in the rental private sector, is a major issue. I don't know how that is actually being supported, what it is been possible to do, because you must have presumably had a major risk assessment problem there. Which brings me to the risk assessment of EDDC staff and what in fact has been the situation. Have you done mental health risk assessments, or has somebody in HR been doing that, quite apart from the physical dangers of getting some kind of infection? I think one of the biggest problems certainly must have been a lot of stress in our own staff. Which brings me to another thing. You've lost quite a number of staff and had to recruit new staff. Has that been resolved now? How, are you back up to strength, or are you still having problems recruiting staff? So quite a few issues, Andrew. Sorry about that. Thank you, Councillor Allen. Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Allen. Yes, all good points. The figures I've reported are the ones I've got, but you know, it does feel to me as though some of the things that are probably related to COVID have been captured, perhaps as a noise complaint or a complaint about rubbish, but when you could recode it. So the total numbers are correct. I take your point, there may be more that are related to COVID, but perhaps not specifically flagged as due to the pandemic. Yes, absolutely. The role of private sector housing team is particularly difficult during the lockdowns and has been difficult during the pandemic. And I think we've got some really important work to do over the coming year. We see as perhaps coming out of the more serious lockdown sometime as we approach spring, and we've got a busy work programme to tackle some of the issues you outlined, particularly about the suitability of people's homes. You know, people should be in an appropriate dwelling, and we do work with the private sector. We also work across in our own organisation with our housing options team, and that absolutely is one of our team priorities, is to see our communities housed appropriately. In whatever way we can do that. It might be through improvement of what they're in already. It might be about finding them something more suitable. So that is, yes, absolutely a priority. Risk assessments for East Devon staff. Yeah, honest answer is I don't think we have gone very far down the mental health route. What we do have in place is safeguards. All of our managers are having regular interaction with the people they manage. I certainly do that with the people I look after, and they do it with their teams. And we do try to flag up where issues exist, and we do our best. We've also got an employee assistance program where counselling is available and referrals have been made already in using that resource. Yes, we could probably think about it more carefully. We could probably do more to tackle mental health proactively, but we're not ignoring it. We are doing something, and at the moment it does feel as though it is in proportion and it is working. Then the final point about recruitment is well made. We are having a major problem recruiting appropriately qualified and experienced staff back into environmental health. We've talked to recruitment agents about why that may be, and we're just having another blitz with an enhanced hourly rate way above the basic salary rate, to be honest, to try and get people in to help us out over the next couple of months. But it's a problem nationally. Qualified, experienced environmental health staff at the moment are not being furloughed. they're not being made redundant. They're really busy. So we're having trouble attracting people. I also think there's a problem with relocating at the moment. I don't think professional staff are in the right frame of mind to relocate to new areas. They're not really looking for new jobs. So for various reasons, that recruitment has been extremely difficult. We successfully recruited one environmental health officer in the summer. He made the move across from mid-Devon, so it wasn't a big move. He's been great. We've got a really good interim manager helping me out in the environmental protection world, but he's not looking for a permanent job. He's already retired, so he's been a real asset, but he's going to disappear sometime this spring. And we did an internal promotion to our private sector housing principal role, which has been really successful, but that's left an experienced environmental health vacancy in the commercial premises team, which again, we haven't been able to fill at the moment. So we are still carrying significant professional vacancies, which I'm really keen to fill, but only with the right person, to be honest. We've also got out to advert the government funded COVID marshal roles. We're looking for 2 full-time temporary posts for up to 6 months to bolster the business support work we're doing as businesses come back online. And as we've heard, it's not going to be a straightforward back to business as usual. There are going to be important safeguards still required for the coming months. So we hopefully over the next few weeks we'll have 2 extra staff there on the front line, working in the communities, working with businesses to steer them through the complexity of the new regulations and the guidance until we do get back to some sort of business as usual.
Right, okay, thank you very much, Andrew. Okay, Councillor Steve Gazard, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, Andrew, for what all your team do and your excellent report. Like Councillor Mike Allen, I have concerns about some private and landlords, and I thank you for your answer to Alan's question. I've got a question on electric vehicles. It's really pleasing to see that the District Council are moving over to electric vehicles. But there is a problem with electric vehicles. You can't hear them. And it was interesting to see one of our electric vehicles going along a seafront the other day, and one of the operators ringing a bell out the window. So I wondered whether or not you've given any health and safety thoughts to how that can be overcome. I know Exmouth Town Council is writing to our MP Simon Jupp to see if that can be raised in Parliament, to see if we can get manufacturers to do something with it. But can I also thank you and all your staff for what you're doing for the COVID stations. I know that's taken a lot of time and effort. And it's just a question, I don't know whether you will be able to answer it, but with the rollout of the second vaccine later on, sooner rather than later, hopefully, in relationship to the Mayor car park, will that one be able to use, and will there be a cost implication to the council if that one is opened up like it was for the flu injections, please?
Andrew.
Thank you. Okay, through you, Chair. Yeah, we haven't actually done anything specific locally about the risk of electric vehicles. I recognise the issue, and I think it is a national, perhaps even an international thing that needs to be tackled. I've certainly heard electric vehicles in other countries over the last few years that do emit something similar to a reversing beep alarm until they reach a certain speed when they're on the road. So when they're manoeuvring in either direction, for example, it is quite clear. So, yeah,
Andrew, can I interject? Sorry to interrupt. Andrew Hancock here.
Yes.
Just to say that we have already spotted that as a risk, and our operational health and safety officer has put it into the safe system of work for electric vehicles. There is something coming forwards with the production of electric vehicles whereby in the future they will be required to have a tone on them as they're driving under a certain speed to alert people to their presence. We're making sure that in future electric vehicles that we lease, that tone is included. It wasn't in our specification for the first tranche. And as Councillor Gazard has outlined, we've got a workaround at the moment when we're operating on the promenade to have an audible warning.
Fantastic. That's really good news, Andrew. Sorry, I wasn't aware of that latest development, but that does seem to be the right direction. So they emit a tone that warns people of their presence. So that is very positive. Thank you. The vaccine rollout is a thing I'm currently working on, Councillor Gazzard. The answer to the specific question about Mayor Road car park is probably not in terms of vaccines, but I think Mayor Road car park will come online for an additional testing site over the next few weeks. We're currently talking to County Council about that. They are looking for further testing facilities locally, and Exmouth does fit many of their criteria, so that may happen. If it does happen, we've made it clear that if it's going to cost us in terms of lost revenue, we would expect to make a claim for compensation back to NHS, and they've accepted that principle. But at the moment, I don't think they're likely to need the entire car park, and I think for the times of year we're talking about, they will probably be able to exist in part of Mayor Road car park alongside our existing customers at no direct cost to us. In terms of delivery of the COVID vaccine itself, we have been working with NHS and County Council partners. You've probably been aware that there have been certain primary care network-led sites that have come up, particularly in Exmouth. We've got the site at the tennis centre, which is working well. There will be an announcement, we expect, shortly over a national a site, part of the national network that's not currently in the public domain, but it's something we expect to hear about imminently, and I think that will be very close to us, probably close to Exeter, possibly even in East Devon, which will help accelerate the vaccination programme locally. Beyond that, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, as I'm sure you know, is more easy to handle and to break down into smaller batches. The expectation at the moment is the remaining programme is going to be delivered via GP practices and pharmacies over the coming months, and they're not looking to add any more remote sites in either car parks or village halls or anything else. If they want them, we will very happily work with them to provide those sites, but at the moment NHS don't want any more of those sites.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Tom Wright, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to follow on what Councillor Gazzard said. Over the Christmas period, the driver who drives his electric vehicle along our seafront holds his arm out of the window, shaking a bell. It's been rather festive, but I don't think it's necessarily what we want to portray as our image. Again, on that point, I've just bought an electric vehicle, the Volkswagen, and actually at under 12 miles an hour, that vehicle issues a low hum, which warns pedestrians of your presence. So they are possible. The only thing is, I don't know whether my low hum would overcome the sound of the wind and the sea crashing on the pebbles at Budley Beach. But coming on to a more serious point, I'd slightly disagree with Councillor Rylance. It might be that she's not in the location similar to the location where I live. Well, I definitely think people are breaking the rules, judging by the accents, the vehicles, and the different, some very strange vehicles that are coming to certainly our seafront car parks. I'm just wondering if any of our officers have the ability to monitor by checking number plates exactly where those cars are originating from, because I suspect many of them are coming from much further than would be deemed local. And I'm just wondering if our car park attendants who do go and issue tickets, they were issuing tickets the other day, do actually have the facility to scan number plates to see if we can assess exactly where people are coming from. Because I know people in Budley people who are visiting Budley are coming from considerably more distance than even our Prime Minister could deem local. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
So on that, Councillor Wright, thank you. The points you raise are a police enforcement matter, not East Devon Council, but where we could help, and we have offered to help in the past, is if the police felt there was a particular problem and they wanted us, for example, to close a car park, we would work with them to do that, so there wasn't a convenient parking venue for people visiting from out of town. But the practice of travelling from far afield to our beauty spots isn't a local authority enforced matter. We wouldn't have any legal entitlement to get keeper details, for example, from DVLA for that purpose. We can get them for parking contraventions and other matters, but not for that particular piece of legislation. That is police-led. And I know other police forces are doing this around the UK. They are doing AMPR, and they are following up vehicles that are where they shouldn't be for no apparent reason. So perhaps it's a matter we could take back to the Police and Crime Commissioner to find out what resources exactly they're putting into this. But I suspect things are already happening, Tom.
Right, thank you. Now,
Thank you, Andrew.
Well, thank you, Tom. Sounds all right. Committee members, I've had an urgent request from one of the DSOs for a comfort break. So I'm going to have a short break of 10 minutes for that, and we'll come back at 12:30. Is that okay, Sue?
That's fine, thank you, Chair.
Right, okay, cool.